Welcome back, dear friends. Before we begin, share with us in the comments where you are listening from today. We love connecting with our community across the world. Now, settle in as we enter a tale of duty, courage, and unexpected love. A wedding, built on sacrifice. The cathedral stood magnificent against the afternoon sky, its stained glass windows catching sunlight and scattering rainbows across the white marble steps. Inside, hundreds of guests filled the pews, their designer clothes and expensive jewelry glittering under the grand chandeliers. The air smelled of white orchids and roses, carefully arranged in towering displays along every column. A string quartet played softly, their melody drifting through the vast space like a whispered promise. At the altar waited Theodore Grant, a man whose wealth came from real estate empires spanning 3 continents. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his custom suit worth more than most people earned in a year. He stood with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, checking his watch as if this wedding were just another business meeting on his schedule. The bride's hidden tears in. The preparation room, Victoria Matthews stared at her reflection. The wedding gown was a masterpiece of silk and lace, fitted perfectly to her frame, with a train that stretched behind her like a river of cream. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant arrangement, tiny diamonds woven throughout. Makeup artists had painted her face to perfection, yet no amount of powder could hide the sadness in her brown eyes. Her mother entered, wearing a forced smile that did not reach her worried gaze. "Victoria, darling, you look absolutely stunning. Theodore is a very fortunate man." Victoria wanted to scream that she felt anything but fortunate. 6 months ago, her family had been comfortable and happy. Her father ran a successful import business, and Victoria was finishing her degree in literature, dreaming of becoming a teacher. Then everything collapsed. Her father's business partner had embezzled millions, leaving the Matthews family drowning in debt. Bankruptcy loomed like a dark cloud. Theodore had appeared like a solution wrapped in expensive cologne. He offered to clear every debt, to save the family home, to ensure Victoria's younger siblings could finish their education. The price was simple. Victoria would become his wife, not out of love, but as a transaction. A merger of his money and her youth. The weight of family. Love Victoria had tried to refuse. She had shouted, cried, and pleaded with her parents to find another way. But watching her mother's hands shake as she opened bills, seeing her father, aged 10 years in 10 weeks, hearing her little brother ask why they had to sell his piano, Victoria's resistance crumbled. She loved her family more than she loved her own freedom. So she said yes to Theodore, even though his touch made her skin crawl, even though his laugh sounded like stones grinding together. Now, standing in her wedding gown, Victoria felt like a beautiful ghost. Around her, bridesmaids chattered nervously, adjusting their lavender dresses. Her best friend Celeste squeezed her hand. "You can still change your mind. We could run right now." Victoria shook her head. "Where would we go? My family needs this." Celeste looked away, tears forming in her eyes. The ceremony begins. The music shifted to the wedding march. Victoria's father appeared at the door, his face pale but determined. He offered his arm, and Victoria took it, feeling the tremor in his muscles. They stepped into the cathedral aisle. Every head turned, cameras flashed, guests smiled and whispered about how lovely she looked, how perfect the ceremony was, how lucky she was to marry such a wealthy man. Victoria walked slowly, each step feeling like wading through deep water. Her bouquet of white roses trembled in her grip. Theodore waited at the altar, his expression satisfied, like a man who had just closed a profitable deal. The priest stood ready, his ancient book open to the marriage rites, as Victoria reached the front. Theodore extended his hand. His fingers were cold and dry. She placed her hand in his, feeling her heart sink into her stomach. The priest began speaking, his voice echoing through the cathedral. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Theodore Grant and Victoria Matthews, the interruption that changed everything. The priest continued through the traditional words, speaking of love and commitment, words that felt hollow in Victoria's ears. Then he reached the crucial moment. If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. The cathedral fell silent. It was always a formality, a line no one ever actually interrupted. Victoria closed her eyes, wishing desperately for a miracle she knew would never come. Then the heavy wooden doors at the back exploded open with a thunderous crash. Every guest spun around. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Theodore's grip on Victoria's hand tightened painfully. Standing in the doorway, framed by afternoon sunlight, was a man Victoria had never seen before. He was tall and commanding, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His dark hair was slightly windswept, his jaw strong and determined, but it was his eyes that captured everyone's attention. They were an unusual shade of green, intense and unwavering, and they were focused entirely on Victoria. The man strode down the aisle, his footsteps echoing like thunder in the stunned silence. Guests gasped and whispered. Theodore's face turned red with fury. The priest stammered, unsure what to do. The stranger reached the altar and spoke 3 words that shattered the entire ceremony. "I object." A voice from the past. The cathedral erupted into chaos. Guests shouted questions. Theodore roared in outrage. But Victoria could only stare at this mysterious man whose presence commanded the entire room. "Who are you?" she whispered. The stranger's intense gaze softened slightly as he looked at her. "My name is Julian Pierce. Your grandmother once saved my life when I was a child. She showed me kindness when no one else would. Before she passed, I promised her I would watch over you. I have been following your family's situation, and I cannot stand by and watch you sacrifice yourself this way." Victoria's mind reeled. Her grandmother had died 3 years ago, a woman known for her generous, heart and fierce spirit. Could this really be true? Julian continued, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "You deserve to marry for love, not debt. Victoria, you have a choice right now. You can proceed with this arrangement or you can walk away. If you leave, with me, I will personally ensure your family's debts are cleared. No strings attached, just freedom." The moment of decision. Theodore grabbed Victoria's other arm. "This is absurd. Guards, remove this man immediately." Security guards began moving forward, but Julian did not flinch. He simply extended his hand toward Victoria, his green eyes holding hers. "The choice is yours, Victoria. No one can make it for you." Victoria's heart pounded so hard, she thought it might burst through her chest. She looked at Theodore, his face twisted with possessive anger. She looked at her parents, their expressions torn between hope and fear. She looked at the hundreds of guests, waiting to see what she would do. Then she looked at Julian Pierce, this stranger who had burst into her life like a lightning bolt, offering something she thought was impossible: freedom. In that moment, Victoria Matthews made the bravest decision of her life. She pulled her hand from Theodore's grip, lifted her wedding gown, and placed her hand in Julian's. The cathedral exploded with gasps and shouts. Cameras flashed like fireworks. But Victoria heard none of it. She only heard Julian's quiet voice, saying, "Let's go," and felt his strong hand steady her as they walked together down the aisle, away from duty and toward an uncertain but thrilling future. The limousine sped through the city streets, leaving the chaos of the cathedral behind. Victoria sat in stunned silence, her wedding gown pooling around her like a cloud of white silk. Her hands trembled as she clutched her bouquet, the reality of what she had just done crashing over her in waves. She had abandoned her wedding, walked away from the man who was supposed to save her family, and climbed into a car with a complete stranger. Julian Pierce sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes watchful. He had removed his jacket and loosened his tie, looking far less intimidating than he had when bursting through those cathedral doors. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out shaky and uncertain. "What happens now? My family's debts are still crushing them. Theodore will demand revenge. The entire city just watched me humiliate one of the most powerful men in the country." Julian leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but kind. "I told you I would handle your family's financial situation, and I meant it. As for Theodore Grant, he has enough skeletons in his closet that he will think twice before coming after you. But Victoria, we need to discuss something important. A proposition between strangers." The car pulled up to a sleek high-rise building, all glass and steel reaching toward the clouds. Julian led Victoria through a private entrance past security, guards who nodded respectfully, and into an elevator that rose silently to the top floor. His penthouse apartment was breathtaking, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the entire city. The interior was elegant, but surprisingly warm, with comfortable furniture and shelves filled with books. Julian poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Victoria. "Please, sit down. We need to talk about how this arrangement will work." Victoria sank onto a leather sofa, her gown rustling around her. "Arrangement? What arrangement? I thought you were simply helping me out of kindness to my grandmother." Julian settled into a chair across from her, his green eyes never leaving her face. "I am helping you because of your grandmother, that much is true. When I was 8 years old, my mother and I were homeless, living in shelters. Your grandmother found us one winter night, took us to a warm hotel, paid for a month's stay, and helped my mother find work. That kindness changed the entire trajectory of our lives. Without it, I would never have had the opportunities that led to my success." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, recognizing the generosity that had been so typical of her grandmother. But Julian continued, his tone becoming more businesslike. "However, I also have a problem that you can help me solve. My company is facing pressure from shareholders who question my stability. At 32, I have built an empire, but I am unmarried, seen as reckless and unpredictable. They want to see me settled, committed, presenting a family image that will reassure investors and clients." The terms of engagement. Victoria's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You want me to pretend to be your fiancé?" Julian nodded. "For 6 months. We will appear together at public events, allow the media to photograph us, present ourselves as a couple deeply in love. In return, I will clear every cent of your family's debt, ensure they are financially secure, and at the end of 6 months, we will have a mutual parting of ways. You will receive a generous settlement that will allow you to pursue whatever dreams you have, completely independent." Victoria stood up, pacing across the room, her mind spinning. "This is insane. We are complete strangers. How could we possibly convince anyone that we are in love?" Julian rose as well, moving to stand near the windows. "We already convinced them today. Everyone in that cathedral watched you choose me over Theodore. The story is already spreading through social media. Billionaire rescues bride from loveless marriage. The narrative writes itself." He turned to face her, his expression softening. "Victoria, I am not asking you to give up your freedom. I am offering you a partnership. You play a role for 6 months, attend events at my side, and in return, your family is saved and you gain true independence. No one controls you. No one owns you. After 6 months, you walk away with enough money to do whatever you want with your life." A reluctant agreement, Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the city below. Her entire life she had been taught to be practical, to sacrifice for family, to do what was expected. But this felt different somehow. Julian was not demanding her soul the way Theodore had. He was offering a temporary solution that benefited them both. She turned back to him, her voice steady despite her racing heart. What exactly would this involve? What would you expect from me? Julian counted off on his fingers. Public appearances at charity galas, business dinners, and social events. Photographs together for media coverage. Believable affection when cameras are present. You would have your own bedroom here, complete privacy. I travel frequently for business, so you would have plenty of time to yourself. You can pursue your education, your interests, whatever makes you happy. The only requirement is that when we are in public, we present as a committed couple. Victoria considered his words carefully. And after 6 months, Julian's expression was unreadable. After 6 months, we announced that we realized we wanted different things from life. A mutual, amicable separation. No drama, no scandal. You leave with financial security and your reputation intact. I return to my business with shareholders satisfied that I am capable of commitment, even if this particular relationship did not work out permanently. The first test, Victoria took a deep breath. I need one guarantee. My family must never know this is an arrangement. They have to believe it is real, or the guilt will destroy me. Julian nodded immediately. Agreed. To everyone, including your family, this is a genuine relationship. Only you and I will know the truth. Victoria extended her hand. 6 months, but if at any point I feel trapped or controlled, I walk away immediately. Deal? Julian took her hand, his grip warm and firm. Deal. The following evening, Julian and Victoria made their first official public appearance together. A prestigious art gallery opening, attended by the city's elite, guaranteed to draw media attention. Victoria wore a deep blue gown that Julian's stylist had selected, elegant and sophisticated. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and she wore minimal jewelry. As they arrived, cameras flashed like lightning, reporters shouting, questions. Julian's hand rested protectively on the small of her back as they walked the red carpet. He leaned close, whispering in her ear, just breathe, smile. Let me handle the questions. To anyone watching, it looked like an intimate moment between lovers. A reporter thrust a microphone toward them. Mr. Pierce, how long have you and Ms. Matthews been in a relationship? Julian smiled easily. Victoria and I have known each other's families for years. Recently, we reconnected and realized there was something special between us. When I learned she was about to marry someone else, out of obligation rather than love, I could not stay silent. Learning to play the part inside the gallery, the scrutiny continued. Wealthy patrons and business associates approached, congratulating them, asking intrusive questions, studying Victoria as if she were one of the artworks on display. Julian never left her side, smoothly deflecting uncomfortable questions, making introductions. His hand occasionally touching her arm or shoulder in gestures that appeared naturally affectionate. Victoria found herself relaxing slightly, impressed by his skill at managing the social dynamics. When an older woman made a snide comment about Victoria's abandoned wedding, Julian's response was swift and firm. Victoria had the courage to choose authenticity over expectation. I find that incredibly admirable. The woman retreated, properly, chastised. As they moved through the gallery, Victoria paused before a painting of a bird in flight, breaking free from a gilded cage. She stared at it, feeling the symbolism resonate deep in her chest. Julian appeared beside her, his voice quiet. Do you relate to that image? She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He continued, still studying the painting. Freedom is terrifying when you have lived in a cage, even a comfortable one. But it is also the only way to discover who you truly are. Unexpected moments of connection. Victoria turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time since this strange arrangement began. There was something in his eyes, a depth of understanding that suggested his own experiences with feeling trapped. Before she could ask, a waiter approached with champagne. Julian took 2 glasses, handing her one. "To 6 months of freedom," he said quietly so only she could hear. "To freedom," she echoed, and they touched glasses. The evening wore on, and Victoria found herself genuinely laughing at something Julian said, forgetting momentarily that they were performing. He told stories about disastrous business meetings and eccentric clients with a dry wit that caught her off guard. When she laughed, his expression brightened, as if her genuine amusement pleased him more than any business success. Near the end of the event, Victoria's heel caught on the edge of a carpet. She stumbled, and Julian's arm wrapped around her waist instantly, steadying her. For a moment they stood frozen, his arm around her, her hand on his chest, their faces close. His eyes met hers, and something electric passed between them. Something that felt dangerously real. Then he released her, stepping back with a professional smile. "Careful. We cannot have my fiancé injured on our first official date." That night, back at the penthouse, Victoria stood in her new bedroom, a spacious suite with its own bathroom and sitting area. She changed out of the evening gown and into comfortable clothes, her mind replaying the evening. The way Julian had protected her. The genuine laughter they had shared. The moment when he caught her and their eyes met. This was supposed to be simple, a business arrangement, nothing more. But as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Victoria realized that pretending to be in love with Julian Pierce might be far more complicated than she had anticipated. Because somewhere during that evening, during his kindness and wit and the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, the line between pretense and reality had begun to blur. In his own room down the hall, Julian stood, at the window, looking out at the city lights. He had told himself this was purely practical, a solution to his business problems while honoring a debt to someone who had once shown him kindness. But watching Victoria tonight, seeing her strength and vulnerability, her intelligence and grace, he felt something shift inside him, something he had not planned for and did not know how to control. 6 months suddenly felt both impossibly long and far too short. 3 months passed in a blur of elegant dinners, charity galas, and carefully orchestrated public appearances. Victoria and Julian fell into an unexpected rhythm, their pretend relationship taking on layers of complexity neither had anticipated. Mornings began with coffee on the penthouse terrace, discussing the day's schedule. Evenings often ended with them sitting in comfortable silence, Julian reviewing business documents while Victoria read books for the literature courses she had resumed online. The media loved them. Headlines proclaimed them the most romantic couple of the year, the billionaire who had rescued his true love from a loveless marriage. Photographers captured them at restaurant openings, theater premieres, and museum exhibitions. In every photo, they appeared perfectly matched, his hand on her back, her smile genuine as she looked up at him, their chemistry undeniable. What the cameras did not capture were the quiet moments that had become precious to both of them. The way Julian brought Victoria tea without being asked when she studied late into the night. How Victoria learned that he took his coffee black and always read the financial news before anything else. The evening when she found him staring at old photographs of his mother, and she simply sat beside him, offering silent comfort until he was ready to talk. Cracks in the foundation, but beneath the surface of their carefully constructed world, trouble was brewing. Theodore Grant had not forgotten his humiliation. He began spreading rumors through his business networks, suggesting that Julian's company was unstable, that his sudden engagement was a desperate publicity stunt. Investors grew nervous, and Julian's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Victoria. knew something was wrong when Julian returned to the penthouse earlier than expected, his jaw tight with tension. She found him in his study, staring at financial reports spread across his desk. Without thinking, she crossed the room and placed a hand on his shoulder. What happened? For a moment, he looked like he might brush her off, maintain the professional distance they had carefully preserved. Then his shoulders sagged slightly. Theodore is going after my company. He has convinced 3 major investors to pull their funding. The board is questioning my leadership, suggesting that my personal life is affecting my judgment. Victoria felt anger flare hot in her chest. This is my fault. If I had just married him like I was supposed to, none of this would be happening. Julian stood abruptly, his green eyes fierce. Do not ever say that. You deserve better than a life sentence with that man. This is not your fault. It is mine for underestimating how vindictive he could be. But Victoria saw the worry beneath, his defiance, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, a public stand. That night, Victoria could not sleep. She lay in her bed, thinking about Julian's kindness over the past 3 months, how he had saved her family, given her freedom, asked for nothing but her presence at his side. He was facing ruin because of her, and she could not bear it. By morning, she had made a decision. She found Julian at breakfast, already dressed in a business suit, preparing for another difficult meeting with his board. Before he could speak, Victoria said firmly, I want to hold a press conference. Julian looked up, surprise crossing his face. What? Victoria sat down across from him, her voice steady. Theodore is attacking you through me, suggesting our relationship is fake, that I am some kind of gold digger or publicity stunt. We need to counter that narrative directly. Let me speak publicly about why I chose you, about our relationship. Let me make it clear that I stand with you completely. Julian shook his head. Victoria, you do not have to do that. Facing the press is brutal, especially when they are looking for scandal. I will not ask you to put yourself through that. She reached across the table and took his hand, the gesture natural now after months of public affection. You are not asking. I am choosing. You gave me the freedom to make my own decisions, remember? This is my decision. Facing the world. Together, 2 days later, Victoria stood before a room full of reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. Julian stood, slightly behind her, his presence solid and supportive. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her hair pulled back, her expression calm despite her racing heart. She had written no script, deciding that only complete honesty would be convincing. She began speaking, her voice clear and strong. My name is Victoria Matthews. 3 months ago, I was about to marry a man I did not love because I believed I had no other choice. My family was drowning in debt, and I thought sacrificing my happiness was the only way to save them. Then Julian Pierce walked into that cathedral and offered me something I thought was impossible, a choice. The room was utterly silent, every reporter leaning forward. Victoria continued, her eyes finding the cameras. People have suggested that our relationship is a publicity stunt, that Julian rescued me for business purposes, that I am with him for his money. Let me be absolutely clear. Julian saved my family's financial situation, yes. But more than that, he gave me back my life. He encouraged me to return to school, to pursue my dreams, to become independent. He has never once tried to control me or own me. He has shown me what it means to be truly free. The truth behind the pretense. Her voice grew softer, but no less intense. I stand here today not because Julian asked me to, but because I choose to. His business is under attack because he had the courage to stand up for what was right, because he refused to let me sacrifice myself. If that makes him unstable or unpredictable in the eyes of some investors, then those investors do not deserve him. Julian Pierce is the most honorable man I have ever known, and I am proud to be at his side. Victoria paused, and then said words that she had not planned, words that came from a place deeper than strategy. I came here today to defend Julian's reputation. But I realize now that I am also here to say something I have been afraid to admit, even to myself. What began as gratitude and respect has become something more. Somewhere in these past 3 months, I fell in love with him. The room erupted with questions and flashing cameras, but Victoria heard none of it, because she had turned to look at Julian, and his expression had transformed completely. The professional mask he always wore had shattered, revealing something raw and vulnerable and real. He stepped forward and, without a word, pulled her into his arms. When pretend becomes real, the cameras went wild, capturing the moment Julian kissed Victoria in front of the entire press corps. It was not a performance or a calculated move. It was pure emotion, months of carefully suppressed feelings finally breaking free. When they finally pulled apart, Julian's forehead rested against hers, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you too. I have loved you since the night at the art gallery when you laughed at my terrible jokes. Maybe even since that moment in the cathedral, when you took my hand and trusted me completely." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy and relief. I thought this was supposed to be pretend. Julian smiled, that rare, genuine smile she had only seen in private moments. So did I. Turns out we are both terrible at following our own rules. The press conference dissolved into chaos, but neither of them cared. They left hand in hand, ignoring the shouted questions, focused only on each other, facing the future together. The response to Victoria's speech was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with support. Business partners called Julian to express renewed confidence. Investors who had wavered recommitted their funding. Even Julian's board of directors issued a statement praising his integrity and leadership. Theodore Grant's smear campaign collapsed under the weight of genuine public affection for the couple. Victoria's family, who had been following the story with a mixture of confusion and hope, finally understood what had happened. Her mother came to the penthouse, tears in her eyes. "Darling, you should have told us the truth about Theodore, about why you agreed to marry him. We never would have let you sacrifice yourself that way." Victoria hugged her tightly. "I know, Mom, but I wanted to protect you." Her father added gruffly, "This Julian fellow, he is good to you?" Victoria smiled. "He is everything, Dad." 6 months after Julian had burst through those cathedral doors, he and Victoria stood on the terrace of the penthouse, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and crimson. Their original agreement had expired. Victoria was free to leave, to take her settlement and pursue her independent life. Instead, she had moved her belongings more permanently into the penthouse, turning her temporary room into a true home. Julian wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. "You know, I never did properly ask you the first time." Victoria leaned back against him. "Ask me what?" He turned her to face him, and she saw him lower himself onto one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, elegant and beautiful, nothing like the ostentatious diamond Theodore had given her. Julian's voice was steady but filled with emotion. "Victoria Matthews, I fell in love with you while pretending to be in love with you. You taught me that true partnership is not about control or obligation, but about choosing each other every single day. Will you marry me? Not because of debt or duty or arrangement, but simply because we love each other?" Victoria pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As he slid the ring onto her finger, she added, "You know, this will be my second engagement to you. Think we can make it to the actual wedding this time without someone objecting?" Julian grinned. "Well, I certainly will not be objecting, and if anyone else tries, I will personally escort them out." Love that transforms. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony with only close family and friends present. No grand cathedral, No hundreds of guests, no pretense or performance, just two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way, promising to build a life together based on trust, respect, and genuine love. Victoria wore a simple dress of ivory silk, carried wildflowers instead of roses. Julian could not stop smiling the entire ceremony. When the officiant pronounced them married, the small gathering erupted in applause and joyful tears. As they walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, Victoria thought about that terrified girl in the wedding gown 6 months ago, walking toward a future she dreaded. She had been so afraid of losing her freedom, of being owned and controlled. Instead, she had found a partner who celebrated her independence, who encouraged her dreams, who loved her not despite her strength, but because of it. Julian had taught her that true love does not cage you. It sets you free to become everything you are meant to be. Epilogue years later, when people asked them how they met, Julian and Victoria would exchange knowing smiles. They would tell the story of the interrupted wedding, the dramatic objection, the billionaire who could not stand by and watch an injustice. But they would leave out the part about the arrangement, the pretend engagement that became real. Some truths were meant to be kept between two people, sacred and private. What mattered was not how their love began, but how it grew, deepened, and transformed them both. Victoria finished her degree and became a teacher, finding joy in helping others discover their own voices. Julian learned to balance his business, empire with the family they built together, discovering that true success was measured not in profits, but in love. And sometimes, late at night, Victoria would catch Julian watching her with that same intense expression from the day he burst through the cathedral doors. "What are you thinking?" she would ask. He would pull her close and whisper, "I am thinking about how grateful I am that you took my hand that day, that you trusted me enough to walk away from everything you knew." Victoria would smile and reply, "Best decision I ever made." Because in the end, that was the truth that mattered most. When given the choice between duty and love, between obligation and freedom, between pretense and authenticity, they had both chosen each other. And that choice had changed everything.